I don't have that. I'm perfectly balanced, perfectly okay, and there's no hidden darkness inside me. And it's only years later that I realized, with the addiction that manifested and increased in intensity, that, well, I do have a certain darkness in me, and it comes from depths that I do not have access to, which is nothing else than my unconscious mind. And so there are indeed sides of us that we do not control, that we have repressed, and things have been repressed in the back of our mind, which is another way to say the unconscious mind. So, what is the structure of this unconscious mind? The unconscious mind is made of basically three people, three agencies within us. The first agency is going to be our inner child, and our inner child is the emotional center inside us and is storing all the emotions and the wants and the desires. That's the inner child. The second agency within us is the inner parent, and the inner parent worries about social integration, living harmoniously in the community. He develops a structure of authority within us and discipline, but also care and love to fulfill the needs of the child, etc., etc. So that's the inner parent. And the third structure is the inner adult, or like your inner Dalai Lama, or your inner spirit, or whatever you want to call it, which is your spiritual self, which is very detached from all these earthly matters of emotions, of principles or beliefs, and is just there to live the human experience in the best possible way. So, so what is happening inside that psyche? Oftentimes, the inner child and the inner parent will be in conflict, and this creates a lot of stress and unhappiness and misalignment in our lives. The inner child inside us wants something, but the inner parent doesn't want, and that creates a lot of chaos. For example, pornography. Your emotional center wants to watch pornography. We'll see that in a second. But your inner parent think it's a bad idea. Your inner parent knows the damage of pornography, knows the ethical aspects that are involved in pornography, maybe the moral, religious aspects involved in pornography as well. And your inner parent doesn't want you to watch pornography. But your inner child wants to watch pornography, and your inner child wins because it's a want, it's a desire, unconscious, that you can't refrain. Okay, and so the trauma in our development, we carry traumas and emotional wounds. All of us, not only people who have gone through war or through abuse of any kind, or attacks or bullying, and all these are a part of these traumas, but all of us have some amount of repression, some amount of hurt that we've carried from childhood that we never revisited, and that condition our behaviors nowadays in a very strong way. So trauma could be a parent making a comment, or forbidding you to doing something, or a parent being abusive, anything like that. A trauma can be another child hurting you. A trauma can be when you evolve then in a structure that is bigger than just the parent, the family cell, into the school cell, or later in the community cell, and then any hurt you could endure either from someone else or from a form of authorities that you trusted, that leads to betrayal, or anything like that. Also later, of course, the relationship, the amorous relationship, the sexual relationship, the partner companionship relationship is also a big source of trauma. So wherever there is emotional attachment, there is trauma. It's basically that. And so is there a link between emotional attachment and pornography? All right, let's explore that. And one other thing I want to say on trauma before we move on is that sometimes also trauma is created by something that the child will perceive, but they will not really understand what's happening, and it's the interpretation of the situation that's traumatic, and not the actual situation itself. For example, if there is a risk and you're on the side of the road and you're about to step on the road and there's a car coming, if your parent pushes you back, or as a child, and you fall back and maybe you get hurt, you knock your head on the sidewalk or anything, then you will perceive that as traumatic and as your parent hurt you, whereas in truth, your parent was protecting you from cars coming and saved your life. But for the child, this may be a traumatic experience. So there's experiences that are perceived as traumatic when they not necessarily come from a place of harm, but they still create this repression, this harm inside us. Okay, so the second myth we want to explore is about sexual fantasies, and we'll have a tendency to judge sexual fantasies even more so that of others, even more so our own sexual fantasies, and think they are bad. Okay, and in our sexual fantasies, we think that if we think about our sexual fantasies, then maybe we think we're bad, or we're exploiting people, or we're taking advantage, or we're hurting, or we're whatever. And the scenario of the sexual fantasy is going to be felt like that sometimes. So sexual fantasies are very taboo for this reason, because they're very prone to judgment. Okay, the worst question probably that someone could ask you is, what kind of porn are you into? Or what are your sexual fantasies? And this can be very triggering. This can be a very difficult question to, well, first, you don't have to answer anybody who's asking you that, because they haven't asked you for your consent, or is this a safe frame to explore this topic? And you don't have to justify yourself to anyone. But if someone were to ask you that, even if you did not answer, you would probably feel a little bit defensive, a little bit guarded, or very triggered by this question. And so sexual fantasies are taboo because we can extract judgment out of them very easily and judge a person on their sexual fantasies, including ourselves. So when I was addicted to pornography and I decided to end this addiction, I was with my fiancée, Caroline, at the time. I was still with Caroline. And after a 3-year break from pornography, I went back to pornography while I was madly in love with Caroline. And I'm like, what's happening? What is going on? Why do I watch pornography when I'm in love? And so I said, I'm going to end this. And I realized that everybody is watching pornography. You may or may not know that, but pornography are the most watched websites all around the world. Okay, on YouTube, a video that does pretty well is going to do maybe 20 million views, 100 million views or so. On a pornographic site, this is a very standard traffic, 20 million views for a video. So pornographic websites are the most viewed sites on the internet. I think TikTok has just come and dethroned that, but everybody's watching pornography, right? And nobody's talking about it. How fascinating is that? So back to the topic. I decided to end it, and I was like, either everybody's watching pornography, either there is something really, really powerful about pornography that nobody is seeing that is key, or I'm just making this up and I have an attachment to pornography, but not many people have this attachment like I do. And it turns out, and then I started analyzing myself and analyzing the videos I was watching, the topic I was seeking, what was the relationship of power between the characters, what was the scenery in the sexual fantasy, what was the story, etc., etc. To the extent I had an Excel spreadsheet and I was writing this down as I was watching pornography. It was a very interesting experience. And what I came to realize, looking into the science of sexual fantasies, is that sexual fantasies are a regulation mechanism. Sexual fantasies are a regulation mechanism. In a sexual fantasy, you are feeling sexually safe. And I may be talking about safe as in not being the victim of a sexual abuse, but there's also safe as in emotionally safe. There's in safe as like the person you have in front of you is not intimidating. There is safe as in you have the sexual superpowers that you need in your sexual fantasy in order to be feeling sexually safe. So the sexual fantasy is a mental construct where you're going to feel emotionally, sexually safe to engage in the sexual act. And it's been created just so that you're able to reproduce, just so that you're able to pass your gene to the next generation. Some people were having difficulties with being sexually safe, and if you're not sexually safe, you won't be able to reach orgasm. So some people, I guess, were having trouble back in the Australopithecus and the people before us were having difficulties in conceiving and passing their genes because they were stressed. And so with the cognitive revolution 70,000 years ago or so, sexual fantasies started to arise to allow the sexual safety to happen and the orgasm to happen and then the genes to be passed on. Okay, long digression. All this to say, hey, your sexual fantasies are actually a natural regulation mechanism in your own psyche for you to be sexually safe. Interesting, especially when we've talked about trauma just a second ago. So now we're going to put these concepts together, and I'm going to say that pornography is a love story. Now, this is probably pretty shocking to hear for you. You probably think of pornography as something very dark and, something very maybe inhumane, or whatever you think about pornography is totally fine. But if we put these concepts together, so we have some wounds that we carry inside us, some emotional wounds, and there is a mechanism that exists that creates sexual safety that is called the sexual fantasy. And so pornography is nothing else than a repository of sexual fantasies, right? So pornography is the place where we go to feel safe. Pornography is the place where we go to feel safe. And when we say that, there should be something happening in you if you'd never realized that. And it means that there is something in you that is not feeling safe during the day, or maybe that's feeling exhausted, or maybe that's feeling out of reach, or maybe that's feeling sexually dissatisfied, whatever it is. You go to pornography to feel safe. And so I used to say that pornography is the replay of your core wound. Pornography is a sexualized replay of your core wound. If we take, the 4, 5 to 10 biggest trauma you've gone through in your life, this little bag of trauma we call the core wound. And this core wound is dictating a lot of your behaviors, a lot of your fears, a lot of what you think you can and cannot do. And for the most part, it is completely unconscious. You don't know what it is because you don't have access to the unconscious. And there's ways to access the unconscious mind that is beyond the frame of what we're doing here. Pornography is a replay of your core wound. Pornography is the reversed, sexualized replay of your core wound. Pornography is a place where your core wound can be soothed and where you can be okay to be who you are with your fears. So when you are watching pornography, when you get all these wounds and these traumas, there's the inner child that is carrying these wounds inside you, okay? And as I said, until these wounds are revisited, they are still there at the unconscious level, driving your behavior. So you're watching pornography because your inner child is looking for soothing for any particular reason. And if you've had a hard day, emotional day, tiring day, anything, suffering from rejection, you've broken up with your partner, they've broken up with you, you lost a loved one, whatever happened, this emotional stirring is hard to handle for your inner child. And so your inner child is going to go into a universe where they can feel safe. And if you think about it, a pornographic session, that moment when you turn the latch on the door, open your laptop or whatever, tablet, is quality time, right? It's a moment of me time where you can forget about the world and just be in that little soothing cocoon. And pornography feels good. Pornography feels good because of that. Even if the videos are not about lovemaking, or they can be or they cannot be, but and they can be something is in videos, but the content is about allowing you to feel whole, allowing you to feel yourself and that it's okay to be yourself. And if you understand that, you will understand why pornography has such a powerful grip on so many people, because we all carry emotional wounds and pornography can be there to soothe those. All right, so we've got trauma. Pornography is a way to soothe the trauma, but it's not healing the trauma. Pornography is going to reinforce the trauma. It's going to reinforce those fears. It allows us to feel safer, maybe to soothe this pain, but it's not going to heal the wound. And the more we consume pornography, the more we reinforce these wounds. So how do we overcome this trauma? How do we heal the wounds at the root of the addiction that are driving us to watch pornography? First, there's another myth I want to bust very briefly, which is about meditation. A lot of people will tell you that meditation can heal trauma. It's not the case. In my experience and expertise, it is not the case, and be very careful about meditation and trauma, okay? Meditation will possibly reawaken a trauma, and in a meditative state, you have, to an extent, access to your unconscious mind and unconscious representations, like in a dream. And so you may be able to allow a trauma to resurface, but you will not have the tools to heal the trauma. And it's even possible that the trauma resurfaces, or the emotional wound resurfaces, and you feel triggered, and you feel in a state of panic, and you actually don't know what to do with it. So I would certainly encourage everybody in the world to meditate. Conversation for actually the next video. But I would certainly not encourage anybody to meditate with the intention of revisiting a trauma, because it is not the right tool. And you hear some people say that, and I am strongly against that. So please take care of yourself. Be cautious into these realms of power and taboo, where these strong emotions can resurface. So how do we use pornography even to our benefit? Instead of rewatching the same content over and over again, what we want to do is to use the content we watch in pornography and in our sexual fantasy to identify the core wound, and identify the processes through which pornography makes us feel safe, and identify the negative beliefs about ourselves, the negative experiences we've gone through, and eventually identify the core wound that is leading us to watch pornography. And once we've identified the wounds, and in Unhooked we do that through a process that I've invented called fantasy analysis, which is loosely based on psychoanalysis. Once we've identified the core wound, then we can reprocess the core wound with trauma recovery techniques similar to EMDR. I use emotional wounds and trauma reprocessing in Unhooked, but any tool about trauma reprocessing will be suited. Okay, I really recommend that you see a specialist, professional specialist when it comes to trauma. It is not something that I recommend doing on your own, because if you cut the wrong wire at the wrong time, this can lead to very serious consequences. So you need to do this in a safe space with a professional who knows what they're doing. You can do this with me, and you can do this with anyone else who's competent at trauma reprocessing and recovery. Okay, so we've talked a lot in this video. I get pretty carried away about this topic because it's my favorite topic, and it is so powerful. I just want to say this. This is the most powerful process that I know for healing wounds, for therapy, and for happiness. I am a million times happier. I have no problems in my life. at the moment. I haven't had a bad day for the past 4 years or so, and it's not because I have been extremely lucky in the past 4 years, although I have been, but it's because I undertook this process of reprocessing the core wounds that I had in me, and to address those, let go of the emotions, and now I feel aligned and functional, and if I feel like if I want to go in that direction, I will go in that direction. Whereas before, I wanted to go in that direction, and I was ending in that direction, and I was wondering why. Anyway, so what do we do today? Myth busting. We've been busting the myth about trauma. When someone says, I don't have trauma, I don't have any emotional wounds, unless you've worked on those, and very little people have, unless you worked on those with a dedicated professional in trauma recovery, you will probably still carry these unconscious wounds. And the fact that you have a compulsion about pornography, maybe that you're addicted to pornography, is a symptom of a deeper cause, and the root is emotional wounding, unconscious emotional wounding. So these traumas must be addressed. Myth number 2, sexual fantasies are crazy. Sexual fantasies are effed up. Sexual fantasies are dirty, they're bad. Same for sexual dreams, by the way. Some people just blame themselves so hard for having sexual dreams. Like, a sexual dream is just your body releasing extra sperm you've got in you, so that your sperm is renewed at a regular rate, so your sperm is healthy. So there's nothing bad about that. It's just a regulation mechanism again. But sexual fantasies are a regulation mechanism for your psyche, so that you can feel sexually, emotionally safe in a sexual act. Myth number 3, pornography feeds the bad wolf in you. Pornography is going to feed the bad part of you. Yes and no, but mostly no. Pornography is a love story. Pornography is about soothing the wounded inner child. I forgot to say that. In pornography, your inner child wins all the time. In pornography, your wounded inner child wins. Let that sink. And myth number 4, meditation will heal trauma. Meditation will not heal trauma. It will possibly alleviate some of the symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It will potentially allow you to retrack the origin of trauma, but it will not heal it. So again, see a professional like myself or someone else to heal these traumas. And so how do we heal these traumas? Well, we analyze the content we consume in pornography. We understand the story that's at play and how that is allowing the inner child to win every time. And then that points to a certain wound, that the emotional wound that the inner child carries. And then we reprocess this wound through therapy and let go of all these wounds that don't serve you anymore. And the addiction, I'll finish with that. The addiction is a pointer, is just a reminder where your behavior says, hey, look, there's something here that's not been addressed. There is something here that has not been, that is unresolved. And as long as you live a life that's misaligned, it's because there is something that is pointing to something that's unresolved. And the unresolved thing is the emotional wound. But because not many people know how to heal those emotional wounds, a lot of people think it's normal to live with those. But it's not normal, as in, it's not normal or abnormal, but it will not help you to, it's detrimental to leave these unresolved wounds unresolved. All right. Thank you for your attention. I hope you can feel the passion and the dedication I have for the cause of healing trauma as the root cause of addiction. In the next video, we'll be talking about the next pillar, and we're starting to move into the making the life better aspect of things rather than looking into the darkness and the hurtful things of life. We'll be talking about stress alleviation. I will see you there.